A homeless Navy SEAL followed his dog behind a waterfall and found proof his dead brother had been alive for 38 years. A homeless Navy SEAL found a cave behind a waterfall. His dog found what they hid inside. Snow clouds gathered over Montana's Bitterroot Mountains as Jack Mercer, a homeless former Navy SEAL, followed his aging German Shepherd through a remote canyon. Atlas suddenly abandoned an elk trail and charged toward a roaring waterfall. Behind that wall of rushing water waited a hidden cave, a forgotten family, and a secret that would shatter everything Jack believed about his past. Comment 1 or 0 and tell us where you're watching from. The first snow of the season hadn't fallen yet, but the mountains already carried its warning. Gray clouds drifted low across the Bitterroot Range of western Montana, dragging long shadows over endless forests of pine and fir. The wind moved through the trees with a hollow whistle, carrying the scent of ice from the higher peaks. Jack Mercer stood on a rocky ridge overlooking a valley buried beneath wilderness. At 63 years old, he looked older than his age. Years of military service had carved deep lines into his weathered face. His dark hair had faded to steel gray. A scar ran from his jawline into the collar of his flannel shirt, disappearing beneath layers of worn clothing meant to keep the mountain cold at bay. He pulled his jacket tighter against the wind. Beside him stood Atlas. The German Shepherd's thick coat rippled gently as the breeze passed through it. Though the dog was getting older now, there was still something powerful in the way he carried himself. His ears remained alert. His amber eyes constantly scanned the wilderness around them. The dog had once served beside Jack in places neither of them liked to remember. Places filled with dust, gunfire, explosions, and the kind of silence that followed loss. Now the mountains were their battlefield, their refuge, their prison. Jack rested a hand on Atlas's neck. "You smell it too, huh?" Atlas stared toward the distant tree line. Snow. The dog didn't answer, but he didn't need to. After nearly 12 years together, words were often unnecessary. The two of them understood each other in ways most people never could. Jack adjusted the old backpack slung over his shoulder and looked toward the valley below. He needed meat before winter arrived. His supplies were running low. The small hunting shelter he called home sat nearly 10 miles away, tucked beneath a granite cliff where the forest grew thick enough to hide it from passing hikers and hunters. Most people assumed nobody lived that deep in the mountains. Most people were right. Except for Jack. He'd spent nearly 7 years drifting through Montana after everything fell apart. The divorce, the drinking, the panic attacks, the sleepless nights, the jobs he couldn't keep, the friendships he pushed away. Eventually, the mountains became easier than people. Trees didn't ask questions. Rivers didn't judge. And Atlas never cared how broken his owner was. The dog simply stayed. Day after day, year after year, the only creature who never left. Jack started down the ridge. Atlas moved beside him. The elk tracks they'd been following wound through patches of fresh mud left by autumn rains. Several animals had passed through during the night. Good-sized herd, enough to keep them fed for weeks if luck stayed on their side. For nearly an hour they followed the trail deeper into the wilderness. The sky darkened overhead. Wind intensified. Branches swayed. Somewhere far away, thunder rumbled behind the mountains. Jack stopped beside a fallen pine. The tracks continued into a narrow valley ahead. Not much farther. Atlas suddenly froze. Every muscle in his body tightened. His ears shot forward. Jack noticed immediately. Years of combat had trained him to recognize changes in behavior before danger appeared. "What is it?" Atlas ignored him. The dog sniffed the air. Once. Twice. Then his entire posture changed. Not alert. Not defensive. Focused. Determined. almost urgent. Jack frowned. The elk trail no longer mattered to Atlas. Something else had captured his attention. The German shepherd turned abruptly and began moving away from the tracks. Atlas. The dog kept walking. Hey. Nothing. Jack watched him disappear between the trees. That was unusual. Atlas was disciplined, extremely disciplined, even in retirement, especially in the wilderness. The dog never abandoned a command. Never. Yet now he seemed completely uninterested in the hunt. Jack sighed. Wonderful. He adjusted his pack and followed. At first he assumed Atlas had picked up the scent of a bear or a mountain lion, maybe a wounded animal, something worth investigating. But the farther they traveled, the stranger it became. The terrain grew rougher, steeper, rockier. The elk trail vanished entirely behind them. Atlas pressed forward without hesitation. Jack struggled to keep up. The dog wasn't wandering. He was heading somewhere specific, as if he already knew exactly where he wanted to go. The canyon appeared shortly before noon. Towering walls of granite rose hundreds of feet on either side. The temperature dropped noticeably. Shadows filled the narrow passage. The wind howled overhead like distant voices. Jack stopped. His instincts stirred uneasily. He had never been here before, despite years roaming these mountains. Atlas continued deeper. Hold up. The dog didn't stop. Jack watched him disappear around a bend. For a moment, irritation flared inside him, then concern. Atlas never acted like this, not without reason. Jack hurried after him. The canyon narrowed further. The sound reached him before the source became visible. Water. A tremendous amount of water. The roar echoed between the stone walls ahead. Jack rounded the corner and stopped cold. A waterfall, at least 80 feet tall. White water crashed down a sheer cliff face into a dark pool below. Mist filled the air like smoke. The entire canyon seemed alive with movement and sound. Jack stared. He had lived in these mountains for years, yet somehow he'd never discovered this place. The waterfall looked untouched, ancient, hidden. Atlas stood near the edge of the pool, watching, waiting. Jack walked closer. Okay. You brought me to a waterfall. Atlas didn't react. The German shepherd's attention remained fixed on something beyond the falling water. Jack followed the dog's gaze. Nothing. Just rock. Water. Mist. The cliff face. Atlas stepped forward. Then another step. Then another. The dog approached the waterfall itself. Jack's confusion deepened. What are you doing? Atlas began pacing, back and forth, back and forth. His breathing quickened. His tail remained stiff. The behavior reminded Jack of military detection work. The dog wasn't exploring. He was trying to communicate, trying to show something. Atlas suddenly barked. Once. Sharp. Urgent. The sound echoed through the canyon. Then he rushed toward the waterfall. Jack watched in disbelief as the German shepherd disappeared briefly into the mist, before reappearing near the rock wall beside the falling water. The dog pawed at the stone, scratched, whined, returned, then did it again, over and over. Jack slowly approached. Years of experience had taught him one simple rule. When Atlas became this focused, pay attention. The dog had saved his life more than once. Jack trusted him more than he trusted himself. What do you see, boy? Atlas barked again. The sound carried desperation now. Not excitement, not aggression, urgency, as if time mattered. Jack moved closer. Mist soaked his jacket. Cold water sprayed across his face. The roar of the waterfall became deafening. Atlas scratched furiously at a section of rock beside the falling water. Jack narrowed his eyes. Something felt strange. Wrong. The stone wasn't shaped like the rest of the cliff. There was a shadow there. A darker space hidden behind the curtain of water. Almost impossible to notice from a distance. Jack stepped closer. His pulse quickened. Atlas whined softly, then looked directly at him. Waiting. The same way he'd looked at Jack before missions overseas. The same look that meant, pay attention. You're missing something. Jack stared through the wall of rushing water, and for the first time, he realized the waterfall might be hiding something behind it. Something Atlas had somehow detected. Something nobody else had found. The wind howled through the canyon. The sky darkened overhead, and Atlas barked one final time at the hidden shadow beyond the falling water, as if begging Jack to see it, as if he had spent years waiting to bring someone here, and now that moment had finally arrived. Jack took a slow step toward the waterfall, toward the darkness hidden behind it, toward a secret buried inside the Montana wilderness, a secret that would change both of their lives forever. Neither man nor dog knew it yet. But beyond that curtain of water waited the first clue to a mystery nearly 4 decades old, and Atlas had just found the door. Jack stood motionless at the edge of the pool while icy mist coated his face. The waterfall thundered down from the cliffs above, shaking the canyon with its endless roar. Atlas barked again, short, urgent. The German shepherd pawed at the stone and then looked back at Jack. Waiting. The same way he used to wait before entering dangerous buildings overseas. The same way he waited before warning Jack about hidden explosives and ambushes. The dog had learned long ago that humans were slow to see what animals noticed immediately. Jack exhaled. All right, boy. He tightened the straps of his pack. I'm looking. Atlas immediately returned to the wall of water. Jack followed. The closer he moved, the louder the waterfall became. Soon it drowned out every other sound in the canyon. The world narrowed to crashing water and cold stone. Mist drifted around him like smoke. The hidden shadow he had noticed moments earlier grew clearer. There was definitely an opening behind the waterfall. Not large, not obvious, but enough. Enough for a man to squeeze through. Jack felt a strange sensation settle into his chest. Curiosity. And something else. A faint unease he couldn't explain. Atlas slipped through first. His gray and black body vanished behind the falling water. For one brief moment, Jack couldn't see him at all. Then a bark echoed from somewhere beyond. The dog was inside. Jack stepped forward. Ice-cold water slammed against his shoulder. He turned sideways and pressed through the narrow gap. For a few seconds, the world disappeared behind a curtain of white noise. Then suddenly, silence. Not complete silence, but close. The roar of the waterfall became muffled, distant, as if someone had closed a giant door behind him. Jack blinked. His eyes adjusted to the dim light, and his breath caught. The space beyond was enormous, far larger than any natural cave he had expected. A vast chamber stretched deep into the mountain. Sunlight filtered through the waterfall entrance, casting pale blue reflections across stone walls. The air felt cool but strangely dry. Atlas stood 20 feet ahead, waiting. Jack slowly turned. A fireplace. A real fireplace. Built from carefully stacked stone. Nearby stood a wooden table, a rocking chair, shelves, lanterns, a cast-iron stove. His pulse quickened. Someone had lived here, not camped, not sheltered. Lived. For years, maybe decades. What in the world? His voice echoed softly through the chamber. Atlas moved deeper into the cave. Jack followed. Everywhere he looked, signs of human life appeared. Handmade furniture, cooking utensils, blankets folded neatly on a wooden bench, books stacked carefully on shelves. Dust covered everything, but not much, far less than expected. The cave seemed frozen in time, as though the family who lived here had simply stepped outside one afternoon and never returned. Jack's military instincts immediately activated. He scanned corners, doorways, shadows, old habits. Years after leaving the Navy, his brain still assessed every unfamiliar location as a potential threat. Nothing moved, nothing dangerous appeared. Only silence and questions. Atlas stopped beside a shelf. The dog sniffed carefully, then moved on. Jack examined several objects: a lantern, a tin coffee pot, a pair of reading glasses. Everything appeared decades old, yet strangely preserved. The mountain itself had protected the place. Outside, storms came and went, seasons changed, people aged, but inside this cave, time had barely moved. A smaller tunnel branched away from the main chamber. Atlas disappeared into it. Jack followed. The passage opened into another room, a bedroom. His stomach tightened. A wooden bed stood against one wall. A quilt rested neatly across the mattress. Beside the bed sat a small nightstand, and hanging from a wooden peg, a woman's coat. Jack froze. Not because the coat itself mattered, because it made everything suddenly feel real. A family, a woman, a home. Not just survival. Life. Someone had loved this place. Atlas moved to the corner. His nose worked furiously. Then he pushed against something hidden beneath a pile of old blankets. Jack walked over. "What is it?" Atlas nudged the spot again. Jack knelt, carefully lifted the blankets. A wooden chest. Old, dusty, still intact. The lid creaked when he opened it. Inside lay children's belongings. A stuffed bear, a small baseball glove, several worn storybooks. Jack stared. Children. There had been children here. The discovery hit harder than expected. His mind immediately pictured a family gathered around the fireplace, snow falling outside, laughter, warm meals, ordinary moments. The kind of moments Jack had missed for most of his life. Atlas whined softly. The dog rarely made sounds like that, only when sensing emotional distress. Jack realized his hands had started shaking. He pulled away from the chest, breathed deeply. The cave suddenly felt heavier, not frightening, sad, as if every object carried memories trapped inside stone. Atlas nudged his leg, grounding him, pulling him back into the present. Jack scratched behind the dog's ears. "Yeah." His voice sounded rough. "I know." Together they continued exploring. A third chamber sat farther back. This one appeared to have served as a workshop. Tools hung from walls, wood carvings rested on shelves. Half-finished projects remained exactly where someone had left them. Atlas wandered toward the far corner, then abruptly stopped. The German shepherd's posture changed, alert again, focused. Jack immediately noticed. "What is it?" Atlas began scratching. Not at the wall, at the floor, a specific section near an old workbench. Jack walked over. The floorboards looked slightly different. One corner sat higher than the rest. He crouched, ran his fingers beneath the edge, and lifted. A loose board. Hidden storage. Jack's pulse accelerated. Beneath the board lay a narrow compartment. Inside rested a small metal box. Atlas sat beside him, watching, almost impatient, as if he already knew something important waited inside. Jack carefully removed the box. The metal felt cold, heavy. The lid resisted at first, then slowly opened. Inside sat several personal items: a pocket knife, a silver bracelet, a folded handkerchief, and a photograph. Old, black and white. The edges had yellowed with age. Jack picked it up carefully. The moment he saw the image, everything stopped. The cave vanished. The waterfall vanished. The mountains vanished. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. The photograph showed two men standing beside a ranch fence. Young, smiling. One had his arm around the other's shoulders. Brothers. Jack recognized himself immediately. 20 years old. Long before the war. Long before the drinking. Long before everything fell apart. And beside him stood Ryan Mercer, his older brother. Jack's fingers tightened around the photograph. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Ryan's face stared back at him from another lifetime. The same crooked smile, the same broad shoulders, the same eyes. Jack felt his knees weaken. Atlas stepped closer. The dog sensed it immediately. The sudden shock, the confusion, the pain. Jack lowered himself onto the workbench, unable to look away. Ryan Mercer, dead for 38 years, buried according to every story Jack had ever been told. Gone. Yet here he was, hidden inside a secret cave, his photograph carefully preserved, his memory waiting. Jack swallowed hard. A dozen thoughts collided inside his head. None made sense. If Ryan had lived here, then whose grave had they buried? Why was this place hidden? Why had nobody ever spoken about it? Why had Atlas led him here? The questions multiplied faster than answers. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. The first storm of winter was approaching. Inside the cave, Atlas rested his head against Jack's knee. The old soldier stared at his brother's face, and for the first time in nearly 4 decades, the certainty he had carried all his life began to crack. Maybe Ryan had never died. Maybe everything Jack believed about his family was wrong. And if that was true, then this cave was only the beginning. Jack sat motionless on the edge of the workbench, staring at the photograph. Outside, the storm had finally arrived. Wind howled through the canyon. Snowflakes drifted past the waterfall entrance, swirling in the gray afternoon light. The mountains seemed to be closing around the cave, protecting it, guarding its secrets. Atlas lay quietly beside him. The German shepherd rested his head across Jack's boot, watching him with patient eyes. The photograph trembled slightly in Jack's hand. Ryan Mercer, his brother, his best friend. The person he had spent nearly 4 decades trying not to think about. The person he had failed. Jack closed his eyes, and immediately the mountains disappeared. The cave disappeared. The years disappeared. He was 25 again, back on the Mercer ranch, back before everything shattered. The Wyoming sky had always seemed bigger than anywhere else. Jack remembered that. Endless blue stretching over fields of golden grass, windmills turning slowly in the distance, the smell of horses, fresh hay, rain on dry earth. The Mercer Ranch covered thousands of acres outside Sheridan. 3 generations of hard work lived in that soil. Jack and Ryan had grown up believing they would spend their entire lives there. Brothers, partners, family. When they were children, nothing could separate them. Ryan was 5 years older. Big enough to protect Jack from bullies, patient enough to teach him how to ride, strong enough to pull him from trouble. Some of Jack's happiest memories involved chasing cattle with Ryan through open fields beneath summer sunsets. Their father, William Mercer, had built the ranch into one of the most successful operations in the county. Everyone respected him. Many feared him. William Mercer believed in discipline, hard work, obedience. His word was law, especially inside his own family. When Jack was young, he admired his father. When he grew older, he began to fear becoming him. The photograph pulled him deeper into memory. He remembered one summer afternoon, Ryan teaching him to repair fences, the two of them laughing as they worked, their father watching from horseback, smiling. Back then, everything seemed simple. Back then, their family still felt whole. Atlas shifted beside him. The movement pulled Jack briefly back to the present. The cave returned, the cold air, the distant roar of the waterfall. But only for a moment. The memories continued. The first cracks appeared after their mother died. Cancer. Slow. Cruel. Jack had been 17. Ryan 22. Their father never recovered. Not truly. Something hardened inside William Mercer after the funeral. The warmth disappeared. The smiles disappeared. The ranch became everything. Work became everything. Failure became unacceptable. Jack remembered the arguments. More every year. His father demanding absolute loyalty. Ryan trying to keep peace. Jack refusing to bend. Then came the military. At 24, Jack enlisted in the Navy, partly out of patriotism, mostly because he needed to escape. His father called it betrayal. The biggest fight of their lives followed. Jack could still hear every word. You walk away from this ranch. You're walking away from your family. William's voice had echoed through the ranch house. Hard. Cold. Final. Jack had stood in the kitchen gripping a duffel bag. Ryan positioned between them, trying desperately to calm both men, but neither listened. Jack's temper exploded. Years of frustration erupted all at once. He accused his father of controlling everyone around him. His father accused him of selfishness. The argument became a war. Words neither man could ever take back. And when it ended, Jack walked out. Ryan had followed him to the truck. Neither brother knew it would be their last conversation. Jack remembered Ryan standing in the driveway, the Wyoming wind blowing across the fields, the sun setting behind him. You don't have to leave like this. Jack had looked away. I can't stay. Ryan nodded slowly, pain visible in his eyes. Then come back someday. Jack started the engine. I'll think about it. Neither of them said goodbye. That memory hurt most. Not the fight, not the anger, the unfinished goodbye, the promise neither man kept. Jack opened his eyes. The cave felt colder now. Atlas lifted his head. The dog sensed the change. The sadness, the guilt, the grief. Jack rubbed his face. Years of military training taught him how to suppress emotions. Combat demanded it. Survival required it. But some wounds never healed. Some simply buried themselves deeper. He stood and began pacing. The photograph remained clenched in his hand. If Ryan had survived, why hadn't he contacted him? Why let 38 years pass? Why hide? Atlas suddenly rose. The dog moved toward another shelf near the workshop wall. Jack followed automatically. Atlas sniffed along several boxes before stopping beside a small wooden frame hanging on a peg. The frame contained another photograph. This one older, faded. Jack carefully removed it. His breath caught again. The Mercer family. All four of them. His mother, his father, Ryan and himself, taken some time before the cancer, before the fights, before the separation, everyone smiling, everyone happy. Jack stared at his mother's face. He hadn't seen a photograph of her in years, not since selling nearly everything after the divorce. Something twisted inside his chest, a familiar pressure. Dangerous. His breathing quickened. The cave seemed smaller, the shadows darker. Suddenly another memory slammed into him. Not Wyoming, not family, Afghanistan, gunfire, dust, screaming, an explosion. Jack stumbled backward. The photograph nearly slipped from his fingers. His pulse raced. His vision blurred. The cave disappeared. The battlefield returned. His lungs tightened. The panic attack hit with brutal force. After all these years, PTSD still struck without warning. Certain sounds, certain memories, certain emotions, they opened doors he could never fully close. Jack braced himself against the workbench. Breathe. Focus. Control. But the memories kept coming. Faces of men he'd lost. Friends buried overseas. Operations gone wrong. The weight of survival. The guilt of living when others didn't. His heartbeat thundered. Atlas immediately moved. The German shepherd pressed against Jack's leg. Firm, steady, grounding, exactly as he'd been trained. Jack felt the familiar pressure of Atlas's body. The warmth, the weight, the reality. The dog nudged his hand, once, twice, bringing him back. Slowly the battlefield faded. The cave returned. The panic loosened its grip. Jack knelt beside Atlas. His breathing remained ragged, but he was here again, present, safe. The German shepherd licked his hand once, a simple gesture, yet it carried more comfort than words ever could. You always know. Jack's voice cracked slightly. Atlas wagged his tail. For several minutes they remained there together. Just man and dog, two old warriors carrying invisible scars. Eventually Jack stood. The storm outside had intensified. Snow now fell heavily beyond the waterfall. Night would arrive early. They would have to stay inside the cave. The realization felt strangely natural, as though the mountain had invited them in, as though the cave itself wasn't finished speaking. Atlas wandered deeper into the workshop. Jack followed. A narrow shelf ran along the back wall. Several journals rested there, dozens of them, bound in leather, carefully organized. Dust coated the covers, but not enough to hide the initials stamped into each one. R.M. Ryan Mercer. Jack stared. His heart slowly accelerated. The journals could answer everything. What happened after he left? Why Ryan disappeared? Why the cave existed? Why everyone believed Ryan was dead? And most importantly, whether Ryan had ever stopped being his brother. Thunder rolled through the mountains. The cave darkened. Atlas sat beside the shelf, watching, waiting, almost as if he understood the importance of what lay ahead. Jack reached for the first journal. The leather felt worn beneath his fingers. He carefully opened the cover. The first page contained a familiar handwriting. Ryan's. Jack hadn't seen it in nearly 40 years, yet he recognized it instantly. The first sentence stopped him cold. If anyone ever finds this place, they deserve to know the truth about what happened to my family. Jack stared at the words. A chill ran through him, because suddenly he understood something. The cave wasn't simply a home. It was a record, a confession, a hidden history buried inside a mountain. And somewhere within those pages waited the truth about Ryan Mercer, a truth far more complicated than death. The storm raged outside. Snow swirled through the canyon beyond the waterfall, sealing the mountain beneath a blanket of white. Inside the cave, however, time seemed frozen. The old fireplace remained silent. The shelves stood untouched. The furniture waited patiently in the dim blue light filtering through the curtain of water. Jack sat beside the workshop table. Atlas lay at his feet. The first journal rested open in his hands. For several moments, Jack simply stared at Ryan's handwriting. The familiar curves, the careful spacing. His brother's words seemed impossibly alive, as if Ryan had written them yesterday. Finally, Jack began to read. March 14th. The winter storms are finally breaking. Hannah says spring will arrive soon, though I suspect she says that mostly for my benefit. The children have already begun arguing about who will see the first wildflowers. Jack frowned. Hannah. The name appeared casually, naturally, as though Jack should already know who she was. He turned the page. The next entry revealed more. Today marks 5 years since Hannah and I first came to this valley. Every day I thank God for bringing her into my life. Jack lowered the journal. His heart beat faster. Ryan had been married. Not only married, happy. A strange mixture of emotions washed over him. Confusion, surprise, and something painfully close to relief. For decades he had imagined Ryan buried beneath the weight of their father's expectations. Alone, bitter, angry. Yet the journal described something entirely different. A man who had found love. A man who had built a life. Atlas raised his head. The dog watched quietly while Jack continued reading. Entry after entry painted a picture unlike anything Jack expected. Ryan wrote about fishing trips, harvesting vegetables, repairing furniture, teaching children to read. Simple moments, ordinary moments. The kind of life Jack never imagined could exist inside a hidden mountain cave. Hours passed. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, the story unfolded. Then Jack reached an entry that stopped him. Sarah lost another tooth today. She insisted on showing everyone 3 separate times. Hannah laughed so hard she nearly dropped dinner onto the floor. Jack stared at the words. Sarah, a child. Ryan's child. He slowly turned more pages. The names appeared again and again. Sarah, Eli, their children. Jack leaned back. The realization settled heavily across his shoulders. His brother hadn't merely survived. He'd built an entire family, an entire life, and Jack had known nothing about it. Atlas suddenly stood. The German shepherd stretched and moved toward the far side of the chamber. Jack followed automatically. The dog had already proven that his instincts mattered. Atlas approached a wooden cabinet tucked beside the fireplace. He sniffed carefully, then scratched once. Jack opened the cabinet. Inside sat several leather-bound photo albums. His pulse quickened. Carefully, he removed the first one. Dust drifted into the air. The cover creaked softly. Then he opened it. A smile appeared before he could stop it. Photographs. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. A visual record of Ryan's hidden life. The first picture showed a woman standing beside a mountain stream. She wore a simple blue dress. Golden hair rested on her shoulders. Her smile radiated warmth. On the back, written in Ryan's handwriting, Hannah Brooks, the day she agreed to marry me. Jack studied her face. There was kindness there, strength. The kind of strength required to leave the world behind and follow a man into the wilderness. He turned another page. Ryan and Hannah stood together outside the waterfall, much younger, laughing. The cave hidden behind them, neither realizing someone would one day discover these images. Another page. A baby, wrapped in blankets. Sarah. Another. A small boy chasing a dog through a meadow. Eli. Jack smiled despite himself. The photographs felt strangely intimate, like trespassing into someone else's memories. Yet they also filled a hole he hadn't known existed. For the first time in decades, Ryan felt real again. Not a ghost, not a memory. A man, a husband, a father. Atlas whined softly. Jack looked up. The dog stood beside another shelf. This one contained children's belongings. A tiny pair of boots, wooden toys, storybooks. Jack picked up a carved wooden eagle. The craftsmanship was remarkable. Every feather carefully detailed, every line deliberate. He immediately recognized Ryan's work. His brother had always been talented with his hands. The sight triggered another memory. Two boys sitting in a barn during a Wyoming winter. Ryan teaching Jack how to carve. Their father working nearby. Their mother laughing at their uneven creations. For a moment, the memory felt warm, almost comforting. Then sadness followed, because those days had vanished forever. Jack carefully returned the eagle to its place. Atlas wandered deeper into the family quarters. The dog stopped beside a smaller room. Jack stepped inside and froze. A child's bedroom, 2 small beds, a handmade quilt, painted stars on the ceiling, shelves lined with books. The room looked as though the children might return at any moment. The sight hit harder than anything else, because children transformed the cave from a hiding place into a home. This wasn't survival. This wasn't exile. This was family, real family. Jack imagined winter nights, snow falling outside, Ryan reading stories beside the fireplace, Hannah tucking Sarah and Eli into bed. The simple joy of belonging. Something Jack hadn't felt in years. Atlas moved beneath one of the beds. The dog's nose worked furiously. Then he began pawing at the floor. Jack crouched. What now? Atlas continued scratching. A loose board. Another hidden compartment. Jack carefully lifted it. Inside rested a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it. More photographs. This time family portraits. Sarah growing older. Eli holding fish proudly beside a stream. Birthdays. Christmas mornings. Summer picnics. A lifetime preserved in fading photographs. Then Jack found the final picture. And the warmth vanished. The photograph showed the entire family standing together. Ryan, Hannah, Sarah, Eli. All smiling, all happy. But someone had written a date beneath it. October 12th, 23 years ago. The final family photograph. No pictures followed. Nothing after. The album ended abruptly. Jack frowned. A chill crawled through him. Something was wrong. Very wrong. A family that documented every milestone wouldn't simply stop. Not without reason. He opened another journal. The entries grew darker, shorter, more cautious. Several pages had been marked with symbols, warnings, references to events never fully explained. Then one sentence caught his attention. I saw tracks again near the northern ridge. Not animal tracks, human. Jack's expression hardened. He kept reading. The next entry appeared weeks later. Someone has been searching the valley. I don't know how close they've come, but Hannah noticed smoke beyond the ridge. Atlas lifted his head, as though sensing the tension building. Jack turned more pages. The cheerful entries about family life slowly disappeared. In their place came concern, worry, fear. Whoever Ryan feared had never been identified. Not yet. But the journals clearly showed one thing. The cave wasn't simply a home. It was a refuge. A place built to hide. A place built to protect. Jack closed the journal slowly. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. The firelight flickered against stone walls. Atlas moved closer. The German shepherd rested beside him. The cave felt different now. Not mysterious, haunted. Not by ghosts, by lives, by memories, by love, and by secrets. Jack looked around the chamber. The wedding photographs, the children's toys, the books, the quilts, the carved eagle. Every object represented a piece of a family no one outside these walls had ever known existed. A family erased from history. A family hidden inside a mountain. And suddenly, the question that mattered most wasn't whether Ryan had survived. The real question was far more troubling. Why would a man abandon the world to raise his family in secret? What had frightened him enough to hide them here? Atlas stared toward the darkness beyond the workshop. His ears slowly lifted. The dog had noticed something, or perhaps sensed something. Jack followed his gaze. The deeper tunnels disappeared into shadow, waiting, silent, holding answers. And somewhere in those shadows lay the reason Ryan Mercer brought his family into the mountain, a reason far darker than Jack had imagined. The storm continued through the night. Snow piled against the canyon walls. The waterfall still thundered beyond the entrance, but now darkness swallowed everything outside its misty veil. Jack sat near the cold fireplace. Atlas rested nearby, though the German shepherd remained alert. Every few minutes his ears twitched toward the deeper chambers, watching, listening, waiting. The feeling in the cave had changed. The warmth of discovering Ryan's family had faded. Now something colder occupied its place, something hidden between the pages of Ryan's journals. Jack opened another volume. The leather cover creaked softly. This journal was different. The handwriting appeared sharper, more hurried, less peaceful. Ryan had written it nearly 25 years earlier. Jack leaned closer to the lantern light. The first entry immediately grabbed his attention. June 4th. I saw them again today. 3 men riding the northern ridge, the same men who visited the valley last spring. They were searching for something, or someone. Jack frowned. He turned the page. Another entry. June 17th. Hannah says I'm imagining danger where none exists. I pray she's right, but I know what I saw. They were watching the property again. Jack glanced toward Atlas. The dog stared back, as if sensing the tension growing inside the story. The next entries revealed more. A company, mining interests, land purchases, pressure, threats disguised as business offers. Ryan described meetings with representatives from an organization called Northern Continental Minerals, a corporation that had quietly purchased thousands of acres throughout the region. At first, the offers seemed harmless. Money, development, promises of prosperity. Most families accepted. Some became wealthy. Others simply wanted easier lives. But Ryan refused. The reason appeared several pages later. Jack found a folded map tucked between the entries. He unfolded it carefully. The paper showed the mountains surrounding the cave. Several locations had been marked with red circles. Mining surveys, exploration zones, proposed excavation sites. One circle sat directly over land inherited by the Mercer family. Jack studied the map, then read Ryan's note written across the bottom. The mineral deposit is worth far more than they admit. They aren't buying land. They're buying silence. A chill ran through him. Ryan had discovered something valuable. Something powerful people wanted hidden. The journal continued. July 2nd. They offered me more money today than I've ever seen in my life. I said no. The man smiled and said I'd regret it. Jack's jaw tightened. He had met men like that before. Not in Montana, not in Wyoming, but overseas. Power dressed as politeness. Threats disguised as opportunities. The next entries darkened. August 11th. 2 cattle found dead near the eastern fence. No predator marks. No explanation. September 3rd. Barn burned last night. Fire investigators called it accidental. It wasn't. October 27th. Someone cut our water line. Hannah is frightened. The children don't understand why we keep the curtains closed. Jack slowly lowered the journal. The picture was becoming clearer. Ryan hadn't fled because he wanted isolation. He had fled because danger followed him home. Atlas suddenly stood. The dog walked toward the fireplace. His nose pressed against the stonework. Then he returned. Restless. Jack watched him carefully. Years of working together had taught him when Atlas sensed something unusual. But for now, the dog settled back down. Jack returned to the journal. Winter entries followed. The family remained on their property, trying to maintain normal life, trying to ignore growing threats. Then came the entry that changed everything. February 18th. Someone entered the house while we were in town. Nothing stolen. Nothing damaged. But Sarah's bedroom door was left open. The rocking horse moved. A message. They wanted us to know they could reach my family whenever they chose. Jack felt anger building inside him. Not explosive anger. The cold kind. The dangerous kind. The kind he'd learned to control during years in the Navy. Ryan had been hunted. His wife had been threatened. His children had been used as leverage. And nobody had ever known. Nobody except the family trapped inside these mountains. He turned another page, then another. The final entry before the family vanished from public records sat alone on a nearly empty sheet. April 5th. I've made my decision. We leave next week. The valley is no longer safe. The cave will become our home. If anyone finds this journal someday, understand this. I am not running from nature. I am running from men. Jack stared at the sentence. The words echoed through the cave. Simple, direct, heartbreaking. Ryan had abandoned his entire life to protect his family. Everything he'd built, everything he'd known. Gone. Because powerful people refused to leave them alone. Jack closed the journal. The silence felt heavy. Outside, snow continued falling. Atlas slowly approached and rested beside him. The old soldier scratched behind the dog's ears. For several moments, neither moved. Then Jack noticed something else. A second stack of journals. Smaller. Different handwriting. Neater. More elegant. Hannah's. His pulse quickened. Carefully, he opened the first one. The entries immediately revealed another perspective. Ryan sees danger everywhere now. I wish I could convince him to rest, but the fear in his eyes is real. And if Ryan is afraid, then perhaps I should be too. Jack continued reading. Hannah described the family's final months before disappearing. Sarah asking why strangers watched their ranch. Eli waking from nightmares. Ryan checking locks repeatedly before bed. The slow collapse of normal life. One entry stood out. November 8th. The children were playing by the creek when a black truck stopped near the property line. A man stepped out and watched them for nearly 10 minutes. He never crossed the fence. He never spoke. But Ryan saw him. I've never seen my husband look so frightened. Jack's grip tightened around the journal. The fear had been real, not imagined, not paranoia. Systematic pressure. The kind designed to break people. Eventually, Ryan chose the only solution he believed would keep his family safe. Disappear. Become invisible. Hide inside the wilderness. Hide inside a mountain. Hide behind a waterfall. Jack slowly looked around the cave. The furniture, the books, the toys, the family photographs. Everything suddenly made sense. This wasn't an adventure. This wasn't some romantic wilderness dream. This was a fortress, a sanctuary built by a desperate father, a place created to keep his wife and children alive. Atlas suddenly rose again. This time his reaction was stronger. The German shepherd moved quickly toward the rear tunnel. His ears stood tall. His body stiffened. Jack immediately noticed. "What is it?" Atlas didn't bark. He simply stared into the darkness, listening. Jack stood. Every military instinct inside him awakened. The dog wasn't reacting to memories. He was reacting to something now. Something present. Something real. Jack grabbed the lantern. The tunnel beyond remained dark, silent, empty. Yet Atlas refused to look away. Seconds passed, then a minute. Finally, the tension eased. The dog relaxed. Whatever he thought he heard was gone. Jack exhaled slowly. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe shifting rock. Maybe nothing. Still, the moment left him uneasy. He returned to Hannah's journal. The final entry before the family's disappearance from public life sat near the end. May 2nd. Tomorrow, we leave for the cave. I told the children it will be an adventure. Sarah is excited. Eli wants to catch fish. Ryan smiles when they aren't looking, but I know he's terrified. So am I. I pray we're making the right choice. Jack closed the journal. The answer had finally arrived. The mystery that haunted the previous chapters. Why would a man hide his family inside a mountain? Why would children grow up behind a waterfall? Why would an entire family vanish from history? Because Ryan Mercer believed someone was hunting them. And based on everything Jack had read, he had been right. The cave suddenly felt less like a home, and more like a last refuge, a place built by a father trying desperately to save the people he loved. The question that remained was even more frightening. If Ryan had escaped the men hunting him, did they ever stop looking? Or had the danger followed the Mercer family all the way into the mountain? The question lingered in Jack's mind long after he closed Hannah's journal. Outside, dawn was beginning to break. The storm had finally weakened. Pale light filtered through the waterfall, casting silver reflections across the cave walls. Atlas slept near the fireplace. For the first time since entering the cave, the old German shepherd looked tired, even exhausted. The previous day's discoveries had drained both of them. Yet Jack knew he couldn't stop now. The deeper he traveled into Ryan's story, the more impossible it became to walk away. He stood and stretched his aching back. Years of military service and hard living had left their mark. Every joint complained. Every movement reminded him of his age. Atlas opened one eye. The dog watched him rise. Then slowly stood as well. "Morning, partner." Atlas wagged his tail once. Jack smiled faintly. Even after all these years, the dog remained his only constant, his only family. Or at least, that had been true until yesterday. Now everything felt different. Ryan wasn't just a memory anymore. He was everywhere, in every room, every photograph, every journal, every object left behind. Jack moved toward the sleeping quarters again. Atlas followed. The family chambers felt strangely sacred now, not abandoned, preserved, like a museum created by grief. The children's room remained exactly as they'd left it. Books neatly stacked, blankets folded, wooden toys resting on shelves. Jack paused at the doorway. Something about the room pulled at him, a sadness deeper than anything he'd felt so far. Atlas wandered toward an old cedar trunk positioned beneath the window. The dog sniffed carefully, then scratched once. Jack immediately noticed. "What did you find?" Atlas scratched again. The same signal, the same deliberate behavior. The dog wasn't exploring anymore. He was searching, and every discovery seemed intentional. Jack knelt beside the trunk. The lid resisted at first, then slowly opened. Inside rested blankets, children's clothes, a few handmade dolls, and beneath them, several leather-bound notebooks, smaller than Ryan's journals. Different. Jack carefully lifted the first one. The cover bore Hannah's handwriting. Medical notes. His pulse quickened. Atlas sat beside him, watching. Jack opened the journal. The first entries appeared ordinary. Records of illnesses, minor injuries, treatments for common mountain ailments. Hannah had clearly become the family's healer. She documented everything: herbs, remedies, seasonal illnesses. The notebook reflected a woman determined to care for those she loved. But as Jack turned pages, the tone began to change. January 3rd. Sarah developed a fever this morning. Nothing severe. She still played with Eli before supper. January 5th. Fever continues. Ryan says she's strong. I agree. She'll recover. January 8th. Sarah's fever worsened during the night. Jack's chest tightened. The entries continued. January 10th. No improvement. January 12th. Sarah struggles to keep food down. January 15th. Eli developed symptoms this afternoon. Jack stared at the words. The handwriting changed as the entries progressed. The neat letters became rushed, uneven, fearful. Hannah's calm professionalism slowly disappeared beneath growing panic. Atlas lowered his head beside Jack's knee. The German shepherd seemed to sense what was coming. The next pages became increasingly difficult to read. January 20th. Both children remain sick. Ryan and I take turns staying awake. Neither of us has slept properly in days. January 24th. The fever refuses to break. I've tried every remedy I know. Nothing helps. Jack swallowed hard. The cave suddenly felt colder. The walls seemed closer. The silence heavier. Outside, water continued cascading down the cliff face. Inside, tragedy slowly unfolded through faded ink. January 29th. Sarah asked me today if she would miss spring. I told her no. I lied. Jack closed his eyes. For a moment, he couldn't continue. Atlas gently nudged his arm. A familiar reminder. Keep going. Jack reopened the journal. February 2nd. Sarah passed away just before sunrise. Ryan is sitting beside her bed. He hasn't spoken for 3 hours. The words blurred. Jack rubbed his eyes. The image formed instantly. A little girl, a frightened mother, a helpless father, a mountain cave. No doctors, no hospitals, no help, only waiting, only hope, and eventually loss. He turned the page. February 5th. Eli asks where his sister went. I don't know how to answer. February 9th. Eli's fever worsened overnight. February 11th. Ryan buried Sarah in the meadow beyond the waterfall. The snow was waist deep. Jack stared into the distance. The cave no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a prison, a place where love had been trapped alongside grief. The entries became shorter, more desperate. February 14th. Eli can barely speak. February 16th. No improvement. February 18th. God help us. February 19th. Eli died this morning. Jack lowered the journal. The words hit harder than he expected. Not because children dying was unfamiliar. War had shown him more tragedy than most people could imagine. But because this wasn't war. This was family. Ordinary people. Good people. A father and mother trying to protect their children, and failing despite doing everything right. Atlas pressed against his side. The old dog understood sorrow better than most humans. He had seen enough of it himself. Jack continued reading. The remaining entries revealed a family collapsing beneath unimaginable grief. March 1st. Ryan spends hours sitting beside the children's room. March 8th. The cave feels empty now. March 15th. Neither of us knows how to move forward. Then came the final pages. The handwriting trembled. Words wandered unevenly across the paper. April 2nd. I dream of hearing Sarah laugh. April 6th. Eli's boots remain beside the door. I cannot move them. April 11th. Ryan tries to be strong for me, but I see him crying when he thinks I'm asleep. Jack felt something tighten inside his chest. The journal wasn't simply documenting illness, it was documenting heartbreak, the slow destruction of a family. One page remained. The final entry. Jack hesitated, then read, April 14th. I miss my children more than I can survive. If anyone ever finds these words, know that they were loved. Every day, every moment. Ryan gave them everything. And if I cannot continue, it is not because I stopped loving life. It is because life took everything I loved. Jack stared at the page, silent, motionless. The cave seemed utterly still. Even the waterfall sounded distant now. He slowly closed the journal. Neither he nor Atlas moved. Several minutes passed, perhaps longer. The old soldier stared at the floor. The truth had finally emerged. Not all of it, but enough. The family hidden inside the mountain hadn't vanished because of the men hunting them. Not directly. They had survived those threats. They had survived isolation. They had survived harsh winters. What destroyed them was something far simpler. A sickness. A cruel twist of fate. A winter that never ended. Jack looked around the room. The toys, the books, the tiny beds. Suddenly every object carried unbearable weight. They were no longer artifacts. They belonged to real children. Children with names, faces, dreams. Children Ryan had loved. Children Jack had never known existed. Atlas slowly walked into the room. The German shepherd stopped beside one of the beds, then lay down, quietly, respectfully, as though even he understood this place had become sacred ground. Jack sat there for a long time, watching the morning light filter through the cave, listening to the waterfall, thinking about Ryan, thinking about Hannah, thinking about the impossible burden they carried. But one question still remained. The journals explained how the family was broken. They did not explain how Ryan survived afterward, because according to the dates, Ryan had lived for many years after losing everything. And somewhere within the remaining journals waited the answer to an even greater mystery. How had a man who lost his wife and children found the strength to keep living? The question followed Jack through the cave like a shadow. Morning had fully arrived. Pale winter light spilled through the waterfall, turning the stone walls silver and blue. Atlas remained beside the children's room. The old German shepherd seemed reluctant to leave, as though some instinct told him that this place deserved respect. Jack understood the feeling. The cave no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied by memories. Every object carried a story. Every room held traces of lives interrupted. He carefully returned Hannah's medical journal to the cedar trunk. For a moment he simply stood there, listening. The waterfall, the wind outside. Atlas breathing softly nearby. Then he looked toward the fireplace. Something about it kept pulling his attention. The stonework was beautiful, unusually detailed compared to the rest of the cave. Ryan had clearly spent countless hours building it. Jack walked closer. The mantel held several family photographs. A carved wooden eagle. A faded Christmas ornament made by small hands. Atlas slowly approached from behind. The dog sniffed along the stone base, then stopped. His ears lifted. Jack immediately noticed. "What is it, boy?" Atlas sniffed again, then pawed once at the lower stones. Not aggressively, deliberately. Jack knelt. The German shepherd pawed at the same spot again. Years of working together had taught Jack one thing. When Atlas repeated a signal, there was always a reason. He examined the stonework carefully. At first, everything appeared normal. Then he noticed it. One stone near the hearth sat slightly deeper than the others, almost invisible. Jack pressed it. Nothing happened. He tried again. Harder. A soft click echoed inside the fireplace. Jack froze. Atlas immediately stepped backward. The old soldier's pulse quickened. Carefully, he reached into the fireplace. A hidden panel shifted. Behind it lay a narrow compartment concealed inside the stonework. Jack stared. The compartment contained a metal container wrapped in oilcloth. Protected. Preserved. Deliberately hidden. Atlas sat beside him, watching, waiting. Jack removed the container. His hands felt strangely unsteady. Something told him this discovery mattered. The container was sealed against moisture. Ryan had wanted whatever was inside to survive, even after decades, even after his own death. Jack carefully opened the lid. Inside rested dozens of envelopes, neatly bundled together, bound with faded twine. His breath caught. Letters. Dozens of them. Every envelope bore the same name. Jack Mercer. The sight hit him harder than anything he'd found so far. Not the photographs, not the journals, not even Hannah's tragedy. Letters addressed directly to him. Jack carefully picked up the first envelope. His name stared back from the paper. Written in Ryan's unmistakable handwriting. The date beneath it stopped him cold. 28 years ago. He grabbed another. 26 years ago. Another. 22. Another. 18. 10. The letters stretched across decades. Ryan had written to him for years, perhaps for most of his adult life. Yet none had ever been sent. Jack slowly sat down beside the fireplace. Atlas settled beside him. The cave suddenly felt smaller, the world narrower, everything focused on the stack of letters resting in his lap. With trembling fingers, he opened the oldest one. Dear Jack, I don't know where this letter will find you. Maybe Wyoming. Maybe somewhere far away. Maybe nowhere at all. But I need to write it anyway. I've spent years wondering if you're alive. The words blurred immediately. Jack swallowed hard. He continued reading. I heard from someone passing through town that you joined the Navy. If it's true, I'm proud of you. Dad never understood why you left, but I did. Jack lowered the page. For several seconds, he couldn't breathe. Ryan had understood. All these years, while Jack believed his brother sided with their father, believed Ryan judged him, believed Ryan blamed him. The truth had been the opposite. He opened another letter, this one written years later. Dear Jack, I saw your photograph in a newspaper today. It mentioned your unit received commendations overseas. Hannah cut out the article and saved it for me. I wish you could meet her. You'd like her. She says brothers shouldn't stay strangers forever. Jack closed his eyes. The image formed instantly. Ryan sitting beside Hannah in the cave, reading newspaper clippings, following his younger brother's life from a distance, never forgotten, never abandoned. The next letter revealed even more. Sarah asks about Uncle Jack all the time. She wants to know if Navy SEALs really jump from airplanes. I told her yes. I may have exaggerated a little. Jack laughed despite himself. A small sound. The first genuine laugh since entering the cave. Then tears followed. Because Sarah had died without ever meeting him. Eli, too. Children who knew his name. Children who considered him family. Children he never knew existed. Atlas rested his head on Jack's leg. The dog remained perfectly still, as if he understood the importance of this moment. Jack opened another letter, and another. Hours passed. The cave disappeared around him. Only Ryan's voice remained. A brother speaking across decades. A brother who had never stopped reaching out. Some letters described ordinary life. Fishing trips, birthdays, mountain storms. Others spoke of loneliness, regret, hope. The most painful were written after Hannah and the children died. Dear Jack, I don't know why I'm writing tonight. Maybe because you're the only person I can still talk to. Maybe because I miss my family so much I can barely breathe. Maybe because I miss you too. Jack wiped his eyes. Ryan's grief poured from every line. The letters became a lifeline. A conversation with a brother who wasn't there. A way to survive impossible loneliness. Then Jack found a letter dated only 5 years earlier. The handwriting appeared weaker, older. Dear Jack, I saw another article about veterans struggling after the wars. I worry about you. I hope you've found peace. I hope you've found someone who understands you. If not, I hope you've at least found a good dog. The words shattered him, because Atlas had arrived around that same time, as if somehow Ryan had predicted it, as if his brother still knew him despite decades apart. Jack looked down at the German shepherd. Atlas gazed back. Loyal, patient, faithful, the one soul who never abandoned him. The final bundle of letters sat untouched, different from the others, newer. The paper less faded. Jack carefully selected the top envelope. His pulse accelerated. This one had been written only months before Ryan's final journal entries. The handwriting shook slightly. Age, illness, time. Dear Jack, I don't know how many more letters I'll write. The winters feel colder now. My hands aren't as steady. The mountain grows larger every year. But there is something I need you to know. Jack leaned forward. Every word mattered. I never blamed you for leaving home. Not once. Dad did. For a while. But not me. I understood even then. You were trying to find your own life. The same thing I eventually did. The same thing every man must do sooner or later. Jack stared at the page. 40 years of guilt began unraveling. One thread at a time. All those years believing he had destroyed the family, believing Ryan resented him, believing he had failed his brother. None of it had been true. Ryan loved him. Ryan missed him. Ryan followed his life from afar, and Ryan never stopped writing. Jack carefully opened the final envelope. The last letter, the one Ryan never mailed, the one written nearest the end. His hands trembled. Atlas lifted his head. The cave seemed utterly silent. The first line hit like a lightning strike. Dear Jack, if you're reading this, then somehow Atlas found you. Jack froze, completely still. His heart pounded. His eyes darted across the page. Again. Again. The words hadn't changed. Ryan had written Atlas's name, years before Jack ever entered the cave, years before the dog discovered it. A chill ran through him. How could Ryan possibly know about Atlas? And suddenly, more questions emerged. Questions even stranger than before. Questions hidden within the final letter. Questions that promised answers, but also revealed something else. Ryan had been expecting someone, waiting for someone, preparing for someone, and somehow, he believed that person would be Jack. Jack read the line 3 more times. The final letter trembled in his hands. Across from him, Atlas remained still beside the fireplace. The old German shepherd watched him with calm eyes that seemed almost human in the flickering lantern light. Outside, the storm had finally passed. The waterfall thundered steadily beyond the entrance. For the first time since discovering the cave, sunlight pushed through the mist and illuminated the chamber with pale gold light. Yet Jack barely noticed. His entire attention remained fixed on Ryan's final letter. How could Ryan have known? The question repeated endlessly inside his mind. Atlas hadn't even been born when Ryan wrote these words. The dog was only 11 years old. Ryan had been gone far longer than that. Jack continued reading. The answer appeared several paragraphs later. If you're reading this, then somehow Atlas found you, not your Atlas, of course. I don't know his name, but I know you'll never stay alone forever. You're too stubborn to trust people, so eventually you'll trust a dog. And when that happens, that dog will bring you where you're meant to be. Jack stared at the page. A sad smile appeared. Ryan hadn't known Atlas specifically. He had known Jack, known him well enough to predict exactly the kind of life he'd live. The isolation, the loneliness, the need for a loyal companion. The letter continued. I may never see you again, little brother. But if fate is kind, perhaps one day you'll find this place. If you do, know that I never stopped loving you. Jack lowered the paper. His vision blurred. For several moments, he simply sat there in silence. Atlas walked over and rested his head against Jack's shoulder. The gesture broke something loose inside him, a wall he'd carried for decades. Jack wrapped one arm around the dog's neck. Neither moved. Neither needed to. The cave seemed filled with ghosts. Not frightening ghosts. Memories. Love. Regret. Family. Eventually, Jack folded the letter and placed it carefully inside his jacket. He intended to protect it, to carry it, to keep it close. Then Atlas suddenly lifted his head. The change was immediate, subtle, but unmistakable. The dog froze. Every muscle tightened. His ears rotated toward the waterfall entrance. Jack noticed instantly. Years of combat experience made such changes impossible to ignore. What is it? Atlas stood. No bark. No growl. Just intense focus. The old soldier slowly rose to his feet. The cave suddenly felt different. The peaceful atmosphere vanished. Something had changed. Jack moved quietly toward the entrance. Atlas remained slightly ahead. The German shepherd's body language screamed caution. Jack reached the edge of the main chamber and listened. At first he heard only the waterfall. Then, a sound, faint, almost lost beneath the rushing water. Footsteps. Jack's pulse accelerated. Someone was outside. Atlas looked back at him. The dog had heard it too. The footsteps grew louder. Then came voices. Distant, muffled, human. Jack immediately extinguished the lantern. Darkness swallowed much of the cave. Only natural light remained. The voices became clearer. 2 men. Maybe 3. The words themselves remained impossible to understand beneath the waterfall's roar. But their presence alone was enough. Nobody came this deep into the Bitterroots by accident. Nobody. Jack crouched behind a stone partition near the entrance. Atlas remained beside him, silent, disciplined, the way he'd been trained. Seconds later, shadows appeared beyond the waterfall. 2 figures, male, middle-aged, outdoor clothing, backpacks. One carried a flashlight. The other held a folded map. Jack's instincts immediately activated. Not hikers, not tourists. Purposeful. Focused. Searching. The men stepped through the waterfall and entered the cave. One whistled softly. Well, look at that. The other scanned the chamber. Told you it existed. Jack's stomach tightened. They knew about the cave. The first man walked toward the fireplace. After all these years. The second laughed. Old man Ryan hid everything well. Jack felt his heartbeat quicken. They knew Ryan, or at least knew of him. The first man examined the room. Granddad was right. He brought the documents here. Documents. Jack immediately remembered the mining company, the threats, the journals, the men hunting Ryan. The realization struck hard. These weren't random visitors. These were descendants, connected somehow to the people Ryan feared. The second man kicked at a chair. Find the records. Then what? We destroy them. Jack's expression hardened. There it was. The truth. Even after all these years, someone still wanted something hidden. Atlas remained perfectly still, waiting. The first man moved toward the workshop. The second approached the family quarters. The search had begun. Jack knew he couldn't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later they'd discover signs of his presence. Fresh footprints, recently opened journals, supplies, something. The older man stopped abruptly. Wait. What? Someone's been here. Jack's muscles tightened. The man pointed toward the table, an open journal. A mistake. One Jack rarely made. The second man swore quietly. We're not alone. The cave instantly transformed. The atmosphere shifted from exploration to danger. Atlas's ears flattened. Jack rested a hand lightly on the dog's shoulder. Steady, wait. The men exchanged glances. Then one began moving cautiously deeper into the cave, toward Jack, toward Atlas, toward the truth Ryan had spent decades protecting. The distance closed rapidly. 20 feet, 15, 10. Atlas remained motionless. Years of military training held firm. Then the approaching man rounded the stone partition. His eyes widened. Jack moved at the same instant. Fast, controlled, professional. The encounter lasted only seconds. Confusion, surprise, a struggle for position. The second man rushed forward, Chaos erupted inside the chamber. Voices echoed off stone walls. The waterfall drowned much of the noise. Atlas immediately reacted, not with aggression, with protection. His entire focus remained on Jack. One of the men stumbled backward during the confusion and reached toward his pack. Atlas launched himself forward. The movement was pure instinct, pure loyalty, pure devotion. The German shepherd placed himself directly between danger and his handler, exactly as he had done countless times before. Then came a sharp cry. Atlas yelped. The sound cut through Jack like a knife. Time seemed to stop. The dog collapsed onto the stone floor. Jack's world narrowed instantly. Nothing mattered except Atlas. Nothing. The men froze, shock flashing across their faces. They had not expected the dog, had not expected resistance, had not expected a former Navy SEAL. Fear suddenly replaced confidence. One grabbed the other's arm. "We're leaving." The second didn't argue. Within moments, both disappeared toward the waterfall. Then they were gone. The cave fell silent once more, except for the waterfall and Atlas's breathing. Jack dropped to his knees beside the dog. His hands immediately began searching for the injury. Training, instinct, experience, the same skills he'd used on battlefields years earlier. "Easy, boy." Atlas looked up at him, trusting, faithful. The dog tried to stand, failed. Jack's heart sank. "No, stay still." The old soldier carefully examined him. The injury wasn't immediately life-threatening, but it was serious. Serious enough. Atlas had thrown himself into danger without hesitation. Just as he always did. Just as he always would. Because protecting Jack was more important to him than protecting himself. Tears burned behind Jack's eyes. He blinked them away. Not now. There would be time later. Right now, Atlas needed him. The cave no longer felt like a place of discovery. It had become something else. A battlefield. And once again, after all these years, Jack found himself fighting to save someone he loved. Only this time, failure wasn't an option, because Atlas had already saved his life. Now it was Jack's turn to save Atlas. The cave had never felt so quiet. Even the waterfall seemed distant now, muted, far away. All Jack could hear was Atlas breathing, slow, uneven, painful. The old German shepherd lay on a blanket near the fireplace while pale afternoon light faded beyond the curtain of water. Jack worked with steady hands, the same hands that had treated injuries in deserts, jungles, and war zones across half the world. Years of SEAL training took over. Fear had to wait. Emotion had to wait. Atlas came first. The injury wasn't fatal, thank God. But it was serious enough. The impact from the struggle had left the dog weak and unable to put weight on one side of his body. Jack carefully cleaned the wound, checked every inch of Atlas's frame, monitored breathing, pulse, awareness. The dog never complained, never snapped, never panicked. He simply watched Jack, trusting him completely, as he always had. "You're not quitting on me." Jack's voice cracked slightly. "You hear me?" Atlas blinked. His tail moved once. That was enough. Jack exhaled. The tension inside his chest loosened slightly. Outside, clouds drifted across the mountains. The storm had finally passed. Sunlight occasionally pierced through the canyon, scattering rainbow-colored reflections through the waterfall. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Today, it felt lonely. Painfully lonely. Hours passed. Jack remained beside Atlas, refusing to leave him, refusing to sleep. The old soldier sat against the fireplace while memories rose from places he'd spent years trying to bury. Combat, loss, friends who never came home, the divorce, the drinking, the years spent drifting from town to town after leaving the military, the nights sleeping beneath bridges and in abandoned cabins, the endless feeling that life had moved on without him. Atlas had been the one thing that changed all that. The dog had arrived through a veterans program years earlier, a retired military working dog, too old for service, too scarred for adoption by most families, perfect for Jack. Broken meeting, broken. The two had saved each other, and now the thought of losing Atlas felt unbearable. The German shepherd opened his eyes. Jack immediately leaned forward. Easy. Atlas lifted his head slightly, then rested it back down. The effort alone seemed exhausting. Jack stroked the dog's neck. The familiar fur. The familiar scars. The same scars earned beside soldiers who trusted Atlas with their lives, just like Jack trusted him now. As darkness settled over the mountains, the cave became illuminated only by firelight. The shadows danced across the walls. The family photographs seemed almost alive. Ryan, Hannah, Sarah, Eli, watching, waiting, remembering. Jack eventually reached for Ryan's final journals. If Atlas needed rest, then perhaps reading would keep his own mind from unraveling. He opened the first notebook. The dates began shortly after Hannah's death. The entries were sparse, brief, painful. May 3rd. The cave is too quiet. May 17th. I still hear the children laughing sometimes. June 2nd. I forgot Sarah's voice today. It terrified me. Jack swallowed hard. The loneliness in the words felt familiar. Too familiar. He understood that kind of grief. Not identical, but close enough. The slow erosion of connection. The fear of forgetting. The fear that memories might fade. Ryan's entries continued. Months became years, yet somehow he survived. One day at a time. One season at a time. One winter after another. The journals revealed something remarkable. Ryan never stopped writing letters to Jack. Never stopped hoping. Never stopped believing reconciliation remained possible. Even when he lived alone. Even when grief consumed him. Even when age weakened him. Jack kept reading. Outside, darkness deepened. Atlas slept. The fire crackled softly. The cave became a sanctuary once again. Not a hiding place. Not a battlefield. A place where two brothers finally reunited through words. Then Jack reached an entry written only months before Ryan's death. Today I climbed the northern ridge. Hardest climb of my life. Age catches everyone eventually. But I needed to see the valley one more time. Needed to remember what home looked like. Jack stared at the page. Home. The word lingered. When was the last time he'd used it? Years? Decades? The Navy had been home once. Atlas had become home later. But an actual place? A real home? He wasn't sure one existed anymore. Ryan apparently struggled with the same question. Another entry followed. I wonder if Jack ever returned to Wyoming. I hope he did. Someone should. Someone should remember where we came from. The words hit harder than expected. Because Jack hadn't gone home. Not once. Not after leaving. Not after his father died. Not after life collapsed around him. He simply kept moving. Running. Avoiding. Surviving. The journals continued. Then suddenly the tone shifted. A new purpose emerged. A new mission. Ryan began documenting names, companies, property records, land transfers, corporate acquisitions. Jack frowned. The entries grew increasingly detailed. Charts, maps, evidence. The same mining corporation from decades earlier appeared repeatedly. Northern Continental Minerals. The company hadn't disappeared. It had evolved, expanded, merged into larger organizations, changed names, changed leadership, but remained active. Ryan spent years tracking them, investigating them, collecting information. Why? Jack turned more pages. The answer slowly emerged. Families lost property. Ranches disappeared. Water sources became contaminated. Small towns collapsed. The same pattern repeated again and again. Ryan had noticed, and he had started documenting everything. The lonely widower hiding inside a mountain had become something else. A witness, a recorder, a keeper of truths nobody else bothered preserving. Jack sat forward. His pulse quickened. This was important. Very important. Ryan wasn't simply surviving. He was building something, preparing something. Then Atlas stirred. Jack immediately looked up. The dog opened his eyes, more alert this time, stronger. A faint wag of his tail followed. Relief flooded through Jack. That's better. Atlas slowly lifted his head. Still weak. Still hurting, but alive. Still fighting. Jack smiled. A real smile. The first one in days. For several minutes, neither moved. The fire glowed warmly. The waterfall hummed in the distance. The cave felt peaceful, perhaps for the first time since they arrived. Then Jack noticed something. Atlas wasn't looking at him. The dog's attention had shifted elsewhere, toward the far wall behind the workshop, toward a section of stone Ryan never mentioned in any journal. Atlas stared intensely, unblinking. The same look he'd worn before discovering hidden compartments, before finding letters, before uncovering secrets. Jack followed his gaze. The wall appeared ordinary, solid rock, nothing unusual. Yet Atlas remained focused, watching, waiting. The old soldier slowly stood. His heartbeat quickened. What is it now, partner? Atlas struggled to his feet, weak but determined. He limped several steps forward, then stopped directly beside the wall. The German shepherd touched his nose against the stone. Once, twice, then looked back at Jack. The message was unmistakable. There's something here. Jack approached carefully. The firelight flickered across the rock face. At first he saw nothing. Then his fingers brushed across a faint seam hidden between stones. His pulse accelerated. Another compartment. Another secret. Maybe the biggest one yet. Because Ryan's journals ended before answering the most important question. Why had those men come looking for the cave? What exactly were they trying to find? Atlas lowered himself carefully to the ground, exhausted but satisfied. The dog had done it again. One more discovery, one more hidden truth. Jack placed a hand against the concealed section of wall, then slowly pressed. Somewhere inside the mountain, ancient mechanisms shifted. Stone scraped against stone, and a hidden chamber began to open. The sound echoed through the cave like a whisper from the past. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Tiny particles floated through the firelight. For a moment, neither Jack nor Atlas moved. The opening widened slowly. A narrow space emerged behind the stone wall. Dark, silent, hidden for decades, maybe longer. Jack's pulse hammered in his chest. Every discovery inside the cave had changed his understanding of Ryan's life. But something told him this would be different. This wasn't another family memory. This wasn't another journal. This was what Ryan had spent years protecting. Atlas remained lying on the floor, weak, exhausted. Yet his eyes never left the opening. The German shepherd had found it. One final secret. One final gift. Jack grabbed the lantern. Carefully, he stepped into the hidden chamber. The room was smaller than he expected, barely 12 feet wide. Its walls were reinforced with timber. Not natural, deliberately constructed. Someone had invested enormous effort creating this space. Ryan. It had to be Ryan. Wooden shelves lined the walls. Metal containers sat stacked in neat rows. Waterproof cases, file boxes, bundles wrapped in oilcloth. Everything organized with military precision. Jack slowly exhaled. Ryan. The room felt less like a hiding place, more like an archive, a vault, a repository of truths someone wanted preserved. The first metal case sat nearest the entrance. Jack opened it. Inside rested dozens of legal documents, property deeds, land records, survey maps, mining claims, purchase agreements. The papers spanned decades. Some were yellow with age, others looked comparatively recent. Jack examined the first deed. His eyes widened. Mercer Ranch, Wyoming. The original family property. The document included annotations in Ryan's handwriting, cross-references, dates, names, evidence. Ryan had been tracking ownership changes, following paper trails, connecting events. Jack opened another folder, then another. The pattern became obvious. Families throughout Montana and Wyoming had lost land under suspicious circumstances, not always illegally, but rarely fairly. Small ranchers, farmers, retired couples, widows, people without resources to fight powerful corporations. Ryan had documented them all, each story carefully preserved, each loss recorded, each name remembered. Jack's respect for his brother grew with every page. After losing everything, Ryan could have surrendered to grief. Instead, he built a mission, a purpose, a reason to keep living. Atlas let out a soft whine behind him. Jack glanced back. The dog remained awake, watching, protecting. As always, you were right again. Atlas's tail tapped weakly against the stone floor. Jack smiled, then returned to the evidence. One waterproof container stood apart from the others. Larger, heavier, more secure. Ryan had wrapped it in 3 layers of protective cloth. Jack carefully opened it. Inside lay dozens of photographs. Not family photographs. Evidence photographs. Images of polluted streams, collapsed mine sites, destroyed ranch buildings, dead livestock, damaged ecosystems, entire communities impacted by corporate decisions. Each photograph included dates, locations, witness statements. Ryan hadn't merely collected information. He'd built a case, a comprehensive case, a lifetime of work. Jack turned another photograph over. His expression hardened. Northern Continental Minerals. The same company appeared repeatedly, even when operating under different names, different subsidiaries, different executives. The same organization remained hidden beneath every layer. The same influence, the same pattern, the same damage. Jack remembered the men who entered the cave. Suddenly their presence made perfect sense. They weren't searching for treasure. They weren't searching for history. They were searching for this. The evidence. The truth. The thing Ryan spent decades protecting. A chill moved through the chamber. Because if those men were willing to travel into the mountains looking for these records, then somebody still cared. Somebody still feared what Ryan discovered. Jack opened another box. This one contained cassette tapes, audio recordings. Dozens of them. each carefully labeled: witness interviews, personal testimony, town meetings, property disputes. Ryan had spent years gathering voices, stories, evidence beyond paperwork. Among the tapes sat a small digital recorder, much newer than everything else. The battery compartment had been sealed against moisture. A handwritten note rested beside it. For whoever finds this room, start here. Jack's heart accelerated. The final message, Ryan's voice, his last testimony. He carefully inserted fresh batteries from his pack. The recorder clicked on. Static crackled softly. Then a voice emerged. Older, weaker, but unmistakably Ryan. If you're hearing this, then I didn't get the chance to finish what I started. Jack sat down slowly. Atlas listened too. The cave seemed utterly still. Even the waterfall faded into the background. Ryan continued. My name is Ryan Mercer. For 23 years, I've gathered evidence involving land acquisitions, environmental damage, intimidation tactics, and corruption connected to Northern Continental Minerals and its successor organizations. Jack listened intently. Ryan spoke clearly, methodically, like a man determined to leave behind something valuable, something lasting. The recording continued for nearly an hour. Ryan explained everything: names, dates, transactions, witnesses, hidden agreements, destroyed communities, lost livelihoods, entire families pushed aside by greed. Some cases ended decades earlier. Others remained unresolved. Ryan had spent years connecting the pieces, building a record powerful enough to survive him. Then the tone shifted. His voice softened. If you're listening, there's a good chance you're my brother. Jack froze. The recording continued. I always believed you'd find this place eventually. Maybe that's foolish. Maybe it's hope. But I know you, Jack. You never quit once you start asking questions. A smile touched Jack's face despite the emotion flooding through him. Ryan laughed softly on the recording. And if Atlas is with you, tell him he's a good dog. Jack actually laughed. A broken laugh. A tearful laugh. Atlas lifted his head, as though recognizing his own name. Ryan's voice grew quieter. I wasn't collecting this evidence because I wanted revenge. That's important. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I just didn't want people forgotten. The ranchers, the families, the towns. Someone needed to remember. Someone needed to tell the truth. The words settled heavily inside the chamber. Jack understood perfectly. Because Ryan wasn't preserving documents. He was preserving people, their stories, their dignity, their existence. The recording neared its end. If you found this room, then you have a choice. Walk away, or finish what I couldn't. Either choice is yours, but if you choose to continue, take everything, expose the truth, and then go home. The final words nearly broke him. Go home, Jack. You've been gone long enough. The recording ended. Silence returned. Complete silence. Jack sat motionless. Atlas slowly limped toward him. The German shepherd rested his head against Jack's knee. For several minutes, neither moved. Neither spoke. The cave had finally revealed its deepest secret. Not gold, not treasure, not fortune. Truth. Ryan had spent decades preserving truth, and now that responsibility belonged to Jack. The old Navy SEAL looked around the hidden chamber. The shelves, the evidence, the documents, the stories, an entire lifetime's work. Ryan hadn't died forgotten. He hadn't disappeared into the mountains. He hadn't surrendered. He had become a guardian, a witness, a keeper of truth. And somehow, after all these years, He had passed that mission to his younger brother. Jack looked down at Atlas. The dog gazed back. Loyal, steady, faithful. Without Atlas, none of this would have happened. Without Atlas, the cave would have remained hidden forever. Without Atlas, Ryan's story would have died in darkness. Jack gently scratched behind the dog's ears. "We finish it." Atlas's tail moved once, as if he already knew, because beyond the mountains waited a world that needed to hear the truth. And for the first time in decades, Jack Mercer had a reason to leave the wilderness. The decision felt strange, unfamiliar, almost frightening. For years, Jack had measured life one day at a time. One campfire, one mountain trail, one winter survived. The future had never stretched farther than the next snowfall. Now everything was different. Now there was purpose, a mission, a responsibility. Ryan's responsibility, and somehow it had become his. Morning sunlight filled the cave as Jack began packing. The evidence came first. Every document, every photograph, every recording, every journal. He placed them carefully inside waterproof containers, then wrapped those containers inside his pack. Atlas watched from beside the fireplace. The German shepherd remained sore, still healing, but stronger than he had been the night before. The old warrior refused to be left behind. When Jack stood, Atlas stood too. When Jack moved, Atlas followed. Some things never changed. "You stubborn old dog." Atlas wagged his tail. Jack smiled. It felt good to smile again. The cave no longer felt like a mystery. Now it felt like a farewell. Before leaving, Jack walked through every room one final time. The family quarters, the children's room, the workshop, the hidden archive. Each space held echoes of Ryan's life, of Hannah, of Sarah and Eli. People Jack had never known, yet somehow loved. He paused beside the family photographs. Ryan stood smiling beside Hannah, the children laughing between them, a family frozen in time. Jack touched the frame gently. "I found them." The words barely escaped his lips. "I found your story." For a moment, the cave remained silent. Then Atlas nudged his leg. "Time to go." Jack nodded. Together they stepped toward the waterfall, toward daylight, toward the world. The journey out of the Bitterroot Mountains took 3 days. Snow still covered much of the higher terrain. The trails were difficult, the weather unpredictable. But Jack moved with purpose. Atlas stayed beside him every mile, through forests of pine and cedar, across frozen streams, along narrow ridgelines overlooking endless valleys. The old dog never complained, even when pain slowed his pace, even when exhaustion became obvious. The bond between them seemed stronger now, forged by everything they had survived together. The cave, the attack, the discoveries, the grief, the hope. At night, they camped beneath open skies. Jack found himself reading Ryan's letters beside the fire, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, often both. The words felt alive, as though his brother sat across from him, sharing one last conversation. On the 4th day, civilization finally appeared. A highway, power lines, the distant lights of a small Montana town. Jack stopped at the edge of the forest. For several moments, he simply stared. The world felt unfamiliar, louder, faster, stranger. Atlas sat beside him, waiting patiently. "You ready?" The dog glanced up. Jack nodded. "Me neither." Yet they continued. By evening, they reached a small veterinary clinic. Atlas came first. Everything else could wait. The veterinarian examined the German shepherd carefully. The news brought relief. No permanent damage. Time. Rest. Treatment. Atlas would recover. Jack nearly cried hearing those words. The veterinarian smiled. That dog loves you. Jack looked at Atlas. Yeah. The answer felt inadequate. The truth was bigger. Atlas hadn't simply loved him. Atlas had saved him. More than once. After the appointment, Jack rented a small motel room. The first real bed he'd slept in for months. Maybe years. The room felt almost luxurious. Heat, electricity, running water. Atlas immediately claimed the carpet beside the bed. Jack sat near the window. The evidence rested on the table. The mission waiting. Tomorrow he would begin. The next morning, Jack drove south. Toward Wyoming. Toward Sheridan. Toward home. The word still felt strange. Home. He hadn't used it in decades. Yet the closer he traveled, the more familiar everything became. Rolling hills. Open ranch land. Long fences stretching toward distant horizons. The landscape of his childhood. The landscape he'd spent half a lifetime avoiding. Atlas rode quietly beside him, watching the scenery pass. The old dog seemed content, almost peaceful. By afternoon, Sheridan appeared. The town had grown. New businesses, new neighborhoods, new faces. Yet certain things remained unchanged. The courthouse still stood in the center of town. The old train depot remained. The mountains still watched from the horizon. Jack parked near a small law office. A name painted across the window caught his attention. Abigail Turner, attorney at law. Ryan's final notes mentioned her. A lawyer known for helping ranch families. A lawyer people trusted. Jack took a deep breath, then entered. The receptionist glanced up. Can I help you? Jack hesitated. It felt strange speaking about any of this aloud. Finally, he nodded. I need to speak with Abigail Turner. A few minutes later, Abigail herself emerged. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, confident posture, the kind of person who immediately noticed details. Her gaze moved from Jack to Atlas, then back. What can I do for you? Jack placed one folder on her desk, the first piece of Ryan's evidence. Abigail opened it casually. Her expression changed almost immediately. She looked up, then back down, then up again. Where did you get this? Jack answered honestly. From my brother. Abigail frowned. Ryan Mercer? Jack nodded. Her eyes widened. The name clearly meant something. What exactly is this? Jack glanced toward Atlas. The dog remained quietly beside his chair. Faithful as ever. Then Jack looked back at Abigail. It's the truth. Hours passed. Documents spread across the office. Photographs, property records, witness statements, recordings, evidence. The deeper Abigail looked, the quieter she became. Eventually, she leaned back, stunned. This could change everything. Jack said nothing, because he already knew. The truth had waited inside that mountain for decades. Now it was finally emerging. But Abigail wasn't enough. Ryan's evidence needed a voice, a way to reach people, a way to reach the public. That answer arrived through another name Ryan had written repeatedly. Owen Carter, editor, local newspaper, known for refusing to back down. The meeting happened the next day. Owen listened, read, examined, questioned. By the end, he sat speechless. The evidence covered nearly an entire conference table. His hands rested on Ryan's journals. This is real. Jack nodded. Every word. Owen looked toward the window. toward the Wyoming sky, then back toward Jack. Your brother spent his life gathering this. Yes, and now you're finishing it. Jack thought about Ryan, the cave, the letters, the family photographs. Then he glanced down at Atlas. The German shepherd slept peacefully beside the chair, still healing, still loyal, still here. No. Jack smiled softly. We're finishing it. For the first time since leaving the mountains, hope felt real, not distant, not imaginary. Real, because Ryan's story was finally being heard, and somewhere beyond the evidence waited something Jack never expected to find. Family, a future, maybe even a home. For months, Jack Mercer wasn't sure either one truly existed. But Ryan's evidence changed everything. The story exploded across Wyoming and Montana. Local newspapers picked it up first, then regional outlets. Then larger investigations followed. The documents Ryan spent decades preserving were impossible to ignore. Property records matched witness testimony. Photographs matched environmental reports. Corporate correspondence matched land transfers. The truth had survived, exactly as Ryan intended. And now the world could finally see it. Jack stayed out of the spotlight whenever possible. He wasn't interested in interviews. He wasn't interested in attention. He had spent too much of his life hiding from people to suddenly become comfortable around cameras. But there were moments when speaking mattered. Moments when silence would have betrayed everything Ryan worked for. So he told the story. Not just Ryan's. All of it. The cave, the family, the letters, the sacrifices, the people forgotten by history. Each time he spoke, the burden seemed to grow lighter, as though carrying the truth openly required less strength than carrying it alone. Abigail Turner worked tirelessly. The legal process took time. Months of paperwork, research, court filings, property reviews, yet every step confirmed the same conclusion. The Mercer family still possessed legal claims connected to portions of the original ranch holdings. Not everything, but enough. Enough to bring the Mercer name home. One cool autumn morning, Abigail called. Jack stood outside a small cabin he had rented near Sheridan. Atlas rested nearby beneath a cottonwood tree. The dog's recovery was nearly complete. The scars remained. The limp appeared occasionally. But the old warrior had survived. Just like Jack. Just like Ryan. Jack answered the phone. Abigail got straight to the point. It's official. Jack remained silent. His heart already knew. The Mercer Ranch belongs to you. The words seemed impossible, not because of money, not because of land, because of what it represented. Family, memory, belonging. Jack slowly lowered himself onto the cabin steps. Atlas immediately walked over. The German shepherd rested his head against Jack's shoulder. For a long moment, neither moved. Neither needed to. The old ranch waited. The family story waited. The next chapter waited. And for once, Jack wasn't afraid of it. Weeks later, he drove through the ranch gates. The Wyoming sky stretched endlessly above him. Golden grass rolled across the hills. Wind moved through the cottonwoods. The same land. The same horizon. The same place he'd abandoned decades earlier. Yet it felt different now. Warmer. Kinder. Forgiving. Atlas sat in the passenger seat, watching the landscape pass. The dog seemed oddly content, as though he understood they had finally arrived somewhere important. The ranch house stood atop a gentle rise. White paint, wide porch, lights glowing from the windows. Jack stopped the truck. His hands rested on the steering wheel. For a moment he couldn't move, because the house wasn't empty. People waited inside. Family. Real family. Relatives he'd spent months getting to know. Cousins, nieces, nephews, children, grandchildren. People who shared his blood. People who knew Ryan's story. People who welcomed him without judgment, without conditions, without demands. The front door opened. Laughter drifted into the evening air. Someone waved. Then another. Children raced across the yard. Atlas immediately perked up. His tail began wagging. Jack smiled. The sight felt almost unreal. After years of sleeping alone beneath mountain skies, there were people waiting for him. The realization nearly overwhelmed him. Atlas jumped from the truck first. The children immediately surrounded him. The German shepherd accepted the attention with remarkable dignity. A local newspaper had written about his actions inside the cave. The story spread quickly. Everyone knew Atlas now. The dog who found the hidden cave. The dog who protected a former Navy SEAL. The dog who uncovered the truth. To the town, Atlas had become a hero. To Jack, he always had been. Months passed. Winter arrived. Then spring. The ranch slowly came alive again. One section became dedicated to veterans. Jack started helping former service members struggling with PTSD. Nothing formal, nothing complicated. Conversations, coffee, understanding. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes simply being heard changed everything. Atlas became part of that mission too. Veterans who struggled around people often relaxed around him immediately. The old German shepherd seemed to understand pain better than most therapists. He listened without judgment, sat quietly beside those who needed company, offered comfort without words. People noticed. Soon other retired service dogs arrived, then training programs, then partnerships with organizations helping veterans. What began as a small idea slowly grew. Purpose returned to Jack's life. Not survival. Purpose. One afternoon, while repairing a fence line, Jack found himself thinking about Ryan. Not with sadness, not anymore, with gratitude, because everything traced back to the cave. Every friendship, every family connection, every new beginning. Ryan had given him more than answers. He had given him a future. Summer arrived. The family organized a memorial gathering, not a funeral. Those had happened years earlier. This was something different. A celebration, a remembrance, a promise. The entire family gathered beneath a grove of cottonwoods overlooking the ranch. A memorial stone stood at the center. 4 names engraved carefully into polished granite. Ryan Mercer, Hannah Mercer, Sarah Mercer, Eli Mercer. The family hidden inside the mountain. No longer forgotten. No longer invisible. Children placed wildflowers around the stone. The same kind of flowers Sarah once loved. The same flowers Hannah pressed inside her journals. Jack stood quietly beside Atlas. The breeze carried the scent of summer grass. For a moment, he imagined Ryan standing there too, watching, smiling, proud. As evening approached, everyone gathered on the porch. The younger children sat cross-legged on the floor. The older family members filled rocking chairs. Laughter echoed through the house. Stories flowed freely. The ranch felt alive again. Then Jack stood. A letter rested in his hands. Ryan's final letter. The one hidden inside the cave. The one written to a brother he never stopped loving. The room gradually fell silent. Jack unfolded the paper carefully, then began reading aloud. Ryan's words filled the room. Hope. Forgiveness. Family. Love. Every sentence carried across generations. Some people cried. Others smiled. A few did both. When the letter ended, silence lingered. Not uncomfortable silence. Peaceful silence. The kind that follows truth. The kind that follows healing. Outside, the sun began setting. Golden light spilled across the ranch. Children chased each other through the fields. Laughter drifted through the open windows. Atlas slowly walked over and settled beside Jack's chair. The old German shepherd rested his head on Jack's knee, exactly as he had done 1,000 times before. Jack looked toward the horizon. The mountains were visible in the distance, far away now, yet still watching, still present. The cave remained hidden somewhere among them, a secret sanctuary, a place of loss, a place of love, a place where one brother left a path for another to follow. Jack gently rested his hand on Atlas's head. The dog closed his eyes, content, safe, home. For years, Jack Mercer believed survival was enough. One more day, one more season, one more mile. But sitting there on the ranch porch, surrounded by family, laughter, and fading sunlight, he finally understood something Ryan had known all along. A man can survive alone, but he can only truly live when he belongs somewhere. Children laughed across the fields. The porch lights glowed warmly behind him. Atlas slept peacefully at his side. And for the first time since leaving the Navy, for the first time in decades, Jack Mercer realized he was no longer surviving. He was home. If you believe family, loyalty, and doing the right thing still matter, comment 1. If you'd never give up on someone you love, comment 0. In the end, land can be lost and found again, but character is what carries a person through the hardest storms. And if stories about justice, dignity, and perseverance speak to you, consider subscribing and joining us for the next journey.